Hello, everyone. I'm Eddie Pavkovic, at Eddie Pavkovic on Twitter. So I'm one of the chief architects of isolated recovery. We've been working on it for about a little over a year right now. So the way we started was EMC or Dell EMC or Dell EMC Protect already has a substantial amount of tools that we can build isolated recovery on. So we were given the task like, hey guys, solve this. Solve this. Engineering is really busy with other stuff. Try to solve the problem. So one of the first things we did was we decided we're going to go with data domain. We're going to go with MTree replication. And we're pretty much going to say, okay, first establish the MTree replication between the production site and the vault site. The vault site, and I'll talk about that in a moment.
A minor question
Sure.
about internal company names, MTree?
That's basically it's a container within data domain. So essentially what it is the data domain has a file system, a top-level file system. An MTree is like a secure container within that file system.
Like a NetApp Qtree used to be, right?
Yeah, so it's a way where a networker or Avamar writes to this container. It's their own container that they can be replicated later. Does that make sense?
It used to be,
The
yeah.
equivalent of the local volume, basically.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So that's what we're based on. Yep. Okay.
And Glenn, one acronym to define another acronym helps a lot.
Yeah.
How I understand it.
One letter
Just putting it in terms I understand.
Yep. So the next part is we initialize the replication. So this is the key thing that we talked about earlier, is that this is the seeding of the data into the vault. So that way you're keeping up to date. So that's going to take some time. We've had customers that'll put data domains next to each other just to get that data over there as quickly as possible, just to get into the vault, and then wheel that system into a secure vaulted environment that has to be key passed or with your badge or whatever to get into. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create.
Reason for me to put the doors on the racks.
The next thing we're going to do is going to make copy and locks, and I'll talk about that in more detail. After that, we'll verify the data, and also we can do recover. So let me get into this. We call this the bouncy ball slide. My former boss created this because he was tired of explaining isolated recovery over and over again with whiteboards, so he came up with this slide. Essentially, starting out with what Stefan talked about earlier, is that you have your data protection appliance or software writing to this data domain. It's going to write to a particular MTree. That's the container. In this example, we're using Avamar. Networker works the same way, or pretty much anything that can write to the MTree. So we start out by configuring to that. We're going to run our backups, and you're going to see the balls flying over. So this is basically what Avamar does today. It's been doing this now for, 5, 6, 7 years now for writing Avamar MTrees. But the key thing is it's going to come up in a moment. See this A? That's the checkpoint. So that's the metadata. That's the brains of Avamar that has to also be replicated over. Now, the key thing we wanted to point out was that we only want to replicate the MTree. We don't care who writes to that MTree. We just want to make sure that all the data, including the metadata of that appliance or that protection storage software, is replicated over to the vault. That's the key thing here. We wanted to minimize that path. We didn't want, some people were saying, some of you may be familiar with Avamar. Avamar has its own built-in replication technology. But that opens up a Pandora's box of other ports and other accounts we have to worry about. We said, no. We want to keep it simple right down to the MTree level. So we focused on that. So you've done your checkpoint. You've made sure that's saved to the production site. Come on. Okay. Now we're going to establish the link. So now we talked about, we alluded to this earlier. Today we're using the actual network port, but we are focusing also on firewalls and other like data diodes that allows that link to be enabled, right? So right now, so we enable the link. We say, hey, he's going to say, okay, bring the data over. So now it gets replicated over. It's copied into that.
Right. Well, it said IR link, and I was thinking infrared. But
No. We call it the isolated recovery link. So we have to establish a dedicated replication
I was
link between
impressed
the two.
you do 10 gig over infrared.
There goes your air gap.
There's my air gap right here. Yep, there we go. Once we get the data over there, we're going to disable it immediately. One of the challenges we've run into is that we want to minimize that window as much as possible. So data domain every 15 minutes will check to say, hey, is there any new data I need to get? So we're trying to make sure that window is very, very small. We shut the ports down as soon as we know the data is over there and has been saved to the system. All right, one more.
Disable link.
All right. Now we have a read-only copy. So the way data domain does its replication is that it'll continuously synchronize over there as we open the ports. But this is a read-only copy, right? And it's always the most recent. There's not much we can do with that from that point of view. So what we do now is we create another MTree, another container that we control that's enabled with retention lock. What retention lock is, what the benefit of retention lock for data domain is, it makes a locked copy of that data. So as we make a copy of it, we're going to lock it down for a specified period of time in the future. So now that becomes a read-only copy.
You got one.
And you can't change it. You essentially have to destroy the data domain file system to get rid of that, because it'll be locked for that period of time.
How does one do that? Can you do that logically with a command?
What?
Destroy the data
Destroy the
file
data
system.
domain?
You have to be like super user administrator to be able to do that. Yeah.
So the process of opening up the link in the first place, where is that initiated from?
It's from the management
From the
side.
destination side.
The destination.
How does it know that it has one to bring over? How does it know it has one to bring over?
How does it know how to bring data over?
That the backup there is done to start bringing stuff over. What if that's not done yet? How
You
does it know?
have to synchronize the two to make it work. Yeah, that's one of our challenges we have to still solve today. We haven't solved
So
it.
someone on that side has to still talk to your management station to get that started going backwards. Is that? I mean, that's fine. And
Yeah.
It's curious.
Yeah, it's not the most elegant. We want to make it better.
I don't care about elegant if it works.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've got a copy. We've created that MTree for retention lock, and now we're going to make a copy of that, and we're going to set a point in time, and we're going to set the retention lock for, let's say, 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, whatever it takes to copy the data. We use fast copy for that. The beauty of fast copy is that within data domain, it's all pointer. It's just pointers. So it literally does take a couple of minutes at most to copy a huge amount of data. We're not copying any data. We're just updating the pointer count to saying, yep, we have a copy of it. And then we're going to set the retention lock. And the way that works is through the management station, we have to export the file system today in data domain, and then we're going to set the access time for every file. It's file-based locking in data domain. So we set the access time in the future, and that tells data domain, hey, you can't touch this file. You can't mess with it.
Okay.
So
So,
now there is an update to data domain 6.1 that allows us to do this over REST API. So up to data domain 6.0, it's basically through NFS, but after that we'll be able to use REST
okay,
API.
so
You got a
that
question?
file-based lock,
Yep.
where's that being applied? From the management station?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All within the vault.
So it's mounting the NFS.
Yes.
And then going, modify the
access
meta
time.
file on this file.
Yeah.
Just the access time.
Yeah, it's just the snap lock semantics.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. I mean, even if they totally, own the second box, you've got the most. They can't. You at least have your last copy locked up, no matter what.
Exactly the idea.
Yep.
Layered.
Yep.
Layered.
Yeah, and basically we're going to go through and set for every file the retention lock.
Yeah.
And we just set the access time in the
Yeah,
future.
that's good.
Okay, you saved me a whole bunch of scripting.
Yep. Yes. Yep.
By
Then
them
we
doing a whole bunch of
unmount it,
scripting.
And we remove the export.
Well, I'm lazy. I'd much rather have them work than me.
Yeah, and then we just make copies as needed, as designed.
I mean, to be honest, the whole network thing up and down, I think, is fraught with risk of not working for lots of whole different reasons. But what you're doing there, the intent is great. What you're doing there on the second side there is really the key. I think is just what you have to assume that you're compromised. That's
Yes.
the best way to do it.
Yep.
Once you've assumed you're compromised, how are you protecting against that? It comes down to the second box with the lock that not even an admin or super. Now, I don't know a lot about how data domain is managed from a super user perspective, but I know other platforms that have that functionality in them. If you have a locked volume like that, the super user is not allowed to destroy the file system. Are you the same way?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then then you can assume you're owned all you want. They can't do anything about it,
Yep.
and you're good. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
well, except they can change the password so you can't get to it. That's the other issue.
Oh, that's the other thing I need to add too. Data domain has 2 levels of locking. One is called governance, which is what I just talked about here.
Yeah.
They also have compliance, which adds another security account that you have to use to actually set the lock.
Yeah.
Not only if you want to set the lock on the file, you have to pass in a security account that says, okay, you can lock it for that period of time in the future.
That's actually a good question. And from a security perspective on data domain, if let's say I get into the box because I have a password, I'm still not allowed to touch the data, but can I wipe credentials or change credentials of the users to essentially DDoS everybody, or just DOS anybody trying to get to that data?
That I have to get back to you on. I'm not sure about that one.
Because that's
Yeah.
because I would love to see multi-factor requirements or multiple security credentials presented to
I
change.
don't know that answer, but
Yeah, and I'd like to see that.
Like a quorum to do that.
Yeah, but if I'm doing this, what they've been showing as air gap is a firewall that only allows traffic from between the two data domains.
That's still a window, though. But I'm just saying. I'm assuming someone's at the second site.
Physically
in the vault.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And got,
get in the
or
vault.
has
They have to be able to
or owns
swipe
it.
in.
Yeah, or who owns it somehow has gotten it
Yeah,
on the
but
network somehow. But once you've assumed presence somehow, logical or physical, you can, how do you get around that? And I think you just want to make the only way they could screw you up here is by wiping the credentials to allow you to get to that protected data, because that's just as bad as wiping it.
Yeah.
Right. I see.
Yeah, we'll take that as an action item, then follow up on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't know the answer. Sorry. Cool. Yep. Okay, then we've made the copies, and now we're going to show restores. So now we have read-only copies, but let's say you do need to do some kind of restore. You need to bring back the data. So now we're going to make yet another third copy. We call this a sandbox. So the intent here is a read-write copy, right? So we go back. We have the replication, which is always the most recent copy. We have point-in-times read-only copies that are locked. So if you have to go back in time, so say you were compromised, you're able to go back and say, okay, this one was bad. Let me go back to the previous one. That one's good. So now I have a read-write copy that I can now mount and then do a restore from that read-write copy, and then do my either further analysis or do actual production app restore if I needed to.
So how much Avamar infrastructure would I need on the other side to do the restores? Because I've got a data domain, I've got the data.
Yep.
But it's obviously in a structured format.
It's already in Avamar format. So you will need at least an Avamar virtual edition in the vault.
Yeah.
Yep. And you were and I think Howard, right?
Yeah.
You were saying something earlier about having what we want you to do. What we emphasize we want you to do is have a separate forest, separate AD, separate gold copies of your applications in the vault.
The only data that passes from left to right is
the data domain.
is the data domain data.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
That's it.
the restore requires restoring requires enabling another firewall rule.
Yep.
So that there's 3 places you have to touch it before any data comes back the other way.
Yep.
One little nit, something that would have helped in that other example that I talked about where it was only 4.5 days to get back. They did have to rebuild the backup catalog, so that can be lengthy. In this case, because we're storing copies of that too, we would expect to have a little bit of a faster recovery.
Oh, yeah.
So,
How do you license this? This
this is
included?
a professional service engagement that we basically come out and we give you the tools to automate this workflow.
Okay, and then it's a license for the data domain box, or do you license?
Yeah, those,
it?
all the standard licensing for the components here that we talk about apply, which is, whether it's data protection suite, data domain, then you do need the automation workflow, and that comes with a professional service agreement.
And it's a box license or a capacity license?
These are capacity-based
Okay.
on the data domain.
Okay, so I just figured it out. For those slides where you have the air gap, you need to replace that with the little Gandalf and says, "Thou shalt not pass."
I like that.
That's good.
Nice.
How are you achieving that? Are you just shutting down the ports and data domain? Are you doing it at the network level? What are you doing?
So that's actually a very good question. There's actually varying degrees. This solution does not necessarily prescribe a certain air gap style. Like I mentioned, there is literally one customer that sends somebody into the data center to switch cables from one system to another, physically unplug, right? And or there are VPN configurations that customers employ to do this magic, right, of air gapping the connection. But
You can't just shut down the port.
well, there are some that just go into the
On the
Cisco
data domain,
switch
you
and
shut
shut
down
down the
port or the
port,
network port or whatever.
right,
Yes.
on the data domain.
One
But
approach. You could do the if config and bring down the port.
that's
Yeah,
correct.
but you want to control it from the vault side,
Yes.
from the production.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is absolutely
It's
correct.
always
Yep.
done from the vault
Yep.
side.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that IR management station is
But
key.
all of that, so that means it's really only one side of the port with the shutdown. The other guy's always live. So it's the vault side that's going to be shut down at the port level.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
Because you have to imagine the production side could also be doing replication to a DR site
Right.
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, yeah. That just, to me, I just put that is the vault and the DR site to me.
No,
yeah,
no.
that makes sense.
No, so this
Separate
has
content.
two separate
Separate.
content. In fact, sometimes that vault could be sitting in the same production data center as the production system.
And the other thing we wanted to point out was, and we're talking with other customers, that we don't want this to be an archive either. We want this to be
No.
short term.
No.
Short term, like
No,
30 days at
no.
most.
No.
That's site is
Very
CYA.
short
That's a CYA site.
Yeah.
An operational recovery disaster, different type of disaster recovery solution, if you want to call it that. So not an archive. There are exceptions. I mean, there is value in putting routing OS images and binaries through a clean room before you distribute them into your organization, which exposes them to the surface of attack for the hacker. Why not replicate them in as well? Maybe those would be things you would retain longer, right? So it's going to be a little bit dependent on the data, but yeah, typically, I mean, 45 days.
Yeah.
A lot of customers that we have a policy. Anything bigger than 45 days, you need a legal approval to put it on an archive. So certainly shorter retention. Yep.
Yeah, so to continue on, so now we've got the read-write copy available. We will point it back to that gold copy of Avamar, and we'll do what we call a checkpoint restore, which basically brings back the brains of the Avamar from the production site into the vault site. So now the Avamar is essentially rehydrated at this point, and now it looks like as it was in production, but it's a separate, totally separate system. It has nothing to do with the production site, but it has the entire configuration, what policies were configured, what clients were configured, and then from that point, now you're going to do what they call rollback. So now the data is back, and now we're telling Avamar, we do the same thing for Networker. Similar steps for Networkers, you bring over the catalog or the checkpoint, and now you're going to do a forced rollback to say, okay, now bring yourself back to that point in time as you were on the production site. So now you can do restores afterwards.
I'll be honest, there are plenty of companies that use data domain as targets for other packages besides yours. And I don't see why this wouldn't still apply.
Yeah.
No.
So you guys, would your professional services be available for those types of customers as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
You mean as part of the tech refresh, I want to use one of these boxes
Like
for
net backup.
No, let's say they
console.
already have data domains
Yeah.
and they're backing up Veeam or they're backing
Oh, yeah.
up whatever, right? So the point is to have that kind of
Yeah.
service available for.
It ups the cost because there's maybe some more customization you need to do,
Right.
but
Yeah.
that's
But it's
okay.
available
I mean,
for
it's
them
still
too.
better than maybe disrupting your current. Yep.
Just add a little bit more color on the professional services piece. You can apply the professional services and their different packages for varying degrees of what you would like to do on here. If you want it fully automated end to end, you want professional services to come in and assess which applications are the most critical in your environment. There's that, and then you can handle the air gapping automation and do all of that. So it goes all the way from assessment to implementation, or either or.
Yep. And once you've got the Avamar rolled back, then you establish those clients, which are then also gold copies, reattach them to the Avamar, either re-register or whatever. There are standard operating procedures you do on the Avamar side to bring the guys back. And then from that point, you activate them and then bring the data back.
That becomes
Or-
a DR site, really.
Huh?
It becomes a DR site.
In a sense, yes.
Yeah.
In a
Yeah.
sense, yep. Yep.
Difference that we see, a lot of customers, it's much smaller amounts of data. Maybe it's VMs that they would restore. We
It's a
actually had a
subset.
customer that came in.
But you
with
still
an
have to have compute for that to run. There.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
waiting for that.
That's, Stefan alluded to that with the VxRail. Like you would stand up a VxRail or something that you can have a stack enough.
That would just be sitting there doing nothing until until
that-
you weren't using. Yeah.
Or you can do some automated. What we've been asked by other people or other customers to say from a validation run, do periodic runs and validate that what you're bringing over is doable, is
that,
actually
Chris?
restorable.
Like any
That
disaster
answers your
recovery
question,
run,
Chris.
Gotta test it.
Yeah, you got to test it, but
And
just
the-
have it automated, right?
Okay.
So you
And the
have to have VxRail doing something besides just
Yeah.
sitting there.
Okay.
So an interesting wrinkle, one of our large pharmaceutical companies came to us and they built this essentially on an Optiplex. So they came in and then they had, it's VM level, restore, and then that gives them the ability to actually ship it. So do the recovery and then ship that to the cybersecurity team for further analytics. Because, assuming that they're going to fly out and maybe go into the vault is maybe also not an assumption we want to make. So that gives them another, and that's very similar to what Amazon does, right? When they ship you the box with the data.
Snowball, yeah.
Yep.
There you go. So that was actually a very innovative approach. So it's a little bit different. We're not talking about massive failbacks of entire environments, typically like in DR, because we have a flood or a power outage, but it's more segmented because that's where we typically see the issues.
So do you typically see people spending a security budget on this stuff? Or-
Yeah, well,
Right. It
that's,
comes at a different budget than DR. It's not DR.
Yes.
It's security.
yes, that's what we are certainly aspiring to do because there's two budgets in addition to the IT budget that we see, risk and compliance.
Yeah.
Because, this is still another good insurance policy is maybe the wrong word, but it's a risk management tool, right? And then, of course, security. Now, the CISOs that we talk to in the roundtables, they like this quite a lot.
Sure.
right? Because it gives them another thing to do, sort of another layer of protection in their overall posture. And typically, we lean more into the detection, prevention bucket, threat analysis, and threat intelligence, right? This gives them another sort of thing to round out that NIST continuum. So yes, it is possible. We've done it, that we tapped into those budgets as well.
So one of the things I really like about this and your approach to this is that you guys are solving a problem instead of trying to sell a product. That's what I really like this.
Yeah.
What kept Eddie busy and us.
Yeah, we
trying
started
to figure out what's
this
the
in
right approach.
2015, yeah. We were heavily, it's like, got to solve this. How do we solve this with what we have? And
The trigger was
myself's going to take a whole lot of Ansible.
Right.
The trigger was really that large media and entertainment company. We don't name names, but it's pretty clear, I think, and it was a nation state, and in that attack, it was all the combinations you can think of. They went after storage, they went after backup, and it was spooky. And we've evolved, but now you don't need a nation state anymore. The nation states crafted the tools that the bad guys can, gang up on.
Technically, we
exploit,
invented the
and
tools, they stole the tools, and that's what they're using.
exactly right. So that's what led to this initiative. And as we continue to refine, that's kind of what we are looking at.
Cool.